Each wave of sightings adds to the accumulation of reports which defy analysis by present methods. An investigative process in depth is necessary here if, after 20 years of confusion, we want some answers.
The Interplanetary Podcast. The exploration of space for the benefit of all humankind. Your hosts in England and Sweden, Matthew Russell and Linn Boldt-Christmas.
Oh yeah, baby. J. Allen Hynek.
Dr. Ufologist.
A ufologist.
Which is apparently a real term, I guess, because it's such a real science.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was mean right off the gate. Right out the gate, I'm already
Well, yeah, this Joseph Allen Hynek, he was always very disappointed that scientists weren't taking UFOs seriously. And so there's lots of quotes from him about, why shouldn't we take it seriously?
Yeah. Why is everyone being so mean to me?
And maybe, if we took it seriously and we solved the UFO problem, we'd have a quantum leap in understanding the universe.
Those are big words.
A bit of a stretch. He's, I guess, most famous, get this. So in 1972, he wrote a book called The UFO Experience, a Scientific Inquiry. and that is the book that introduces the phrase close encounter.
Yes, of the different degrees.
Of the different degrees, yeah.
And I guess that's what we're talking about today, right? UFOs.
Yeah, UFOs. It's all about UFOs because they're back in the news.
Brackets, close encounters.
Brackets, close encounters. It's such a strange subject, isn't it? Are
you a sci-fi kind of guy?
I love sci-fi. I believe that there is a high possibility that there are extraterrestrials out there in the universe somewhere.
Yes.
Why wouldn't I believe that?
Of course.
Although, the chances of us ever having a conversation with extraterrestrials that are intelligent enough to have conversations, I think is pretty low.
Right. Well, this is something you and I spoke about recently where, even if we found some really irrefutable evidence, like there is 110% definitely aliens, they are waving at us, they've got the neon sign, they've got the welcoming fruit basket, like they want to hang out. Even if that happened, that would not be like a quick Zoom call, start chatting away, because everything's so far away. And I really blame all the movies, all the aliens that swoop down, blow up the White House, and then they leave. Like, it would really be a long-scale encounter, surely, if it was of any kind of closeness degree. Yeah,
well, you'd start seeing the things coming from a long way away, right? Although I suppose we didn't see a Oumuamua coming in.
That's true.
And actually, a Oumuamua is one of those things where it was preposterous how certain scientists...
Yeah, let's not
jumped on
names.
it as though it was an alien sail and things like that. Oh, that's what it is, and it's a weird. Well, we'll talk about it, won't we?
Yeah.
I mean, it's that crossover between UFO and flying saucers.
Yeah, exactly. There's a bunch of things that are quote flying in space that we have no idea what they are. But then like entering the atmosphere, that's when you're starting to get into like tinfoil hat territory.
The bit that I want to dig into later on is that whole idea of why there's a jump from something being an unidentified object to being an alien.
Yeah. Little green man in tin cans.
Obviously, the reason why we wanted to talk about it is actually because one of our listeners, Jelly Sock, suggested it. They wanted to look into this Nimitz thing, the sort of that latest release of all those videos, that the ones called Go Fast and Tic Tac and all those kind of, and Gimbal, and so that all those ones are sort of stoked the fire up again. And the reason why I thought it was funny was because I was watching YouTube and Russell Brand, who seems to have gone completely off the rails recently. It's like but his sort of take on it was so bizarre. I was thinking, but you're an intelligent person. Surely you realise that because the military are admitting that there's UFOs, that's different to the American military admitting there's aliens invading the Earth. It's like, you do know there's a difference between those two sentences.
Yeah, something I've always thought is like, especially taking into context that the kind of pop culture idea of the flying saucer kind of thing comes a lot from the Cold War era. And trust me, there's definitely good reason for the government to be like, oh, that thing you saw? Yep. Oh, you think it's aliens? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's go with that. Sure. There was a lot of things that were being being experimented with, and to tell the public, actually we're planning X, Y, and Z, was probably a lot riskier than just being like, yes, wink, UFOs. Boy, that's pretty interesting. You guys should look into that for the next 50 years.
Yeah, actually, when you see things like when those Falcon 9 launches are at night and they have those big, enormous jellyfish-style structures up in the sky, and you can easily see that when they were doing early tests of rockets and aeroplanes and particularly missile systems, you could have aerial phenomena like that.
Very much.
Of course, yeah, you're absolutely right. Governments would be more than happy that people think that they're aliens.
Yeah.
And talk about them in that sense. So here's some little history nuggets.
Nuggets.
They haven't always been called UFOs. They're sometimes referred to as unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs.
Maybe people were getting confused that it's not UAF phenomenon.
or OAPs. which is an entirely different thing. I've often walked down the high street and there's lots of OAPs getting in my way, but not UAPs. No. There's the ETH, which is associated with it, and ETH is the extraterrestrial hypothesis. So, and this is the bit that I don't get. I don't get why we have to jump from one to the other.
Yeah.
And of course, back in the 30s and 40s, flying saucers was the name that people gave them. This is the thing that people thought they were. And what's strange about that is funny that no one spotted flying saucers until sci-fi and TV and films and comic books started talking about flying saucers. But then suddenly people started seeing flying saucers. It's a bit of a coincidence, is it not?
Which is obviously explained because the aliens were watching our TVs and being like, crap, they're onto us. Might as well show up. Might as well ditch the invisibility cloak, right? That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, and here's the question that I want to ask you is, why is it that now everyone has a really good camera on them at all times?
Yeah.
Like everyone's got like an iPhone or a Google Pixel or whatever, and everyone's got one. And people have got even better cameras than that as well. Yet, still no one seems to manage to get a
There's
good
still the same amount of photos being taken. You're totally right. I mean, when was the last time anyone saw Bigfoot too? Suddenly with the loss of of grainy.
Well, of course, Bigfoot is part of the alien conspiracy.
He's the leader.
You know, maybe he's the pilot.
He's the...
Or maybe they come to rescue him.
That's why they're rushing to get here. They actually dropped him off in 1948, and they've been trying to get him back ever since.
Now, here's one. Did you know the word Foo Fighter is another term for UFOs?
Really?
Yeah.
Because Dave Grohl is Bigfoot.
This.
Case closed.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to
Well, Big Broken Foot as well sometimes. He's Foo Fighter. Yeah, it's from the Second World War. Allied pilots would see mysterious phenomena in the skies, and of course they were convinced it was the Nazis with technology beyond ours.
Yeah.
So they were all in a panic about it, right?
Understandable.
And these radar operators were using phrases from cartoon books from the 30s. Yeah. So there was a sort of these series of cartoons where words in the speech bubbles would sometimes be the word "foo" would be in there as a kind of nonsense word.
Like bang, kapow, foo.
Bang, yeah, pew. Bang, kapow. Gunupchuts, or whatever the word Russian word for bang was. And foo was one of them. And so this Donald J. Myers coined the phrase, those effing Foo Fighters. Every time they would get these weird radar blips.
I love that.
And from 1944, they had to be officially reported. Because, of course, what makes sense, doesn't it, that the US Air Force are going to say, actually, we should treat these very seriously. Right. And rightly so. Because you've got
They're at war.
Even during the Cold War and during, times where you're keeping an eye on what your enemies are up to, what your potential enemies are up to, you do need to know what the hell's going on and whether there's planes in the right place, wrong place.
Yeah, of course.
Whether there's, new types of plane that you've not thought of. In the early 50s, they actually bring out a regulation that it has to be reported. They're called UFOBs at that time, UFOBs, which I don't know what the B stood for. But they used that term in the Regulation 202, 1953.
Yeah.
And there's a line in there that kind of sums it up, really, is that the possibility exists that an air vehicle of revolutionary configuration may be developed as a result of people, using the evidence of what they see. Maybe there's either someone else has got it, or using this unknown phenomena, maybe we can design better aircraft ourselves. So, it's possible threat to US security and possible learning experiences.
Possible inspiration for plagiarism.
Possible inspiration, yeah. For
Military plagiarism.
Or learning from nature, in the same way that you watch a seagull and how well it flies. You go, well, maybe let's look at the wing design of how it's doing all that kind of stuff. And so I guess, they've looked at nature, and already aircraft design are kind of based on
That's
inspiration
true.
from nature, right? So it makes sense that these things are being reported. So those are UFOs. Right?
Yeah,
so there's nothing really extraordinary about that at all, is there?
It's it's literally unidentified in the sense that we don't know more than that. But the things that we don't know is a pretty wide category.
Yeah, in fact, a UFO definitely isn't alien technology, because if it was, we would have identified it as alien technology. So a UFO is like literally the opposite of that.
Do you know what I think?
So I literally don't know what it is.
I just think humans love a drama, and we just love to, make that assumption because it's way more interesting than weather balloons. to fantasize a little bit. I wasn't actually, for someone who studies space, I wasn't very into like sci-fi stuff growing up. Actually, I'm more of like a Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind type of sci-fi, if you know what I mean. Less laser guns, more abstract reality, depression, time bending. But I do love like that 50s, 60s Cold War era like art style of like UFOs and crazy futuristic, like retro futurism. I love that stuff. And it's just fun, I guess, right?
Yeah, well, it's very romantic, isn't it? There's definitely a romanticism about flying saucers and
something
like
to come and pick us up and whisk us away from this horrible world. All that good stuff.
Absolutely. Now, one of the biggest incidents was in your home country.
In Sweden? We have aliens?
Yeah. Sweden had notable alien incursions.
I knew it. No, we call those Danish people, usually.
We call them the French.
We've all got one.
So the Swedish, they had this thing called ghost rockets.
I have never heard of that.
To be fair, you would have been extremely unborn at this point in 1946.
Extremely unborn. On the spectrum of unbornness. How unborn are we talking?
My guess is about 40-odd years unborn.
Probably, yeah.
So this is back in 1946. 2,000 sightings. 2,000 sightings. Yeah, of what looked like rockets being fired. Some of these were picked up by radar as well. So 200 actually got verified by radar sightings as well. And sometimes authorities recovered physical fragments of the ghost
That doesn't sound very
rockets.
ghosty.
Yeah. No, well, exactly. Well, we'll get onto it, because initially they thought, well, this must be the Russians testing V2 rockets out, right? So this is the era where the Russians and the Americans have managed to grab as much as they can from the collapse of von Braun's V2 rocket building factories, and have basically got them and started to test them. And the Russians are testing them, perhaps. And maybe that's what can be seen from Sweden. Because, as you know...
We have a rich history of suspecting Russians.
Yeah, and you've got little Russian islands nearby, is that right?
We've got the Baltic Sea.
They're out in the Baltic Sea. There's those... I can't remember what they're called now, but there's a couple of Russian kind of archipelagos.
We find submarines there all the time.
Well, yeah. When submarines are everywhere. But so the Swedish authorities decide to make this secret... because they realise that if it is Russian rockets, and this is interesting, if there is Russian rockets, what they don't want is Swedish people helping the Russians with their investigations into rockets. In other words, if Swedish people are saying, yes, we saw this rocket here.
Oh, right. Yes, it landed at coordinates.
Yeah. So that then the Russians know, oh, yeah, that's what we must have done wrong. Or that's what we must have done right. So... the Swedish government sort of clamped down on it, and the US decided to come over and have a little look to see what was going on. Not only that, the British and the Greek armies, who were sort of based near there, also started seeing it.
Cool. Did they ever find out what it was?
It's almost certainly meteor showers.
Cool.
Because a lot of the sightings happened in those meteor shower times.
That's Perseid. What is it called? The August meteor shower.
So I think it was the
roughly around
Perseid.
then.
Actually, yeah.
What has the meteors got against Sweden then? Isn't that weird then that it would only be hitting?
Well, I think it's one of those things. Imagine like you live in a town and someone says, God, have you seen these ghost rockets? And then everyone goes out at night and starts looking for them. The thing is, if everyone went out, you'd see meteors all the time.
That's true. And I was going to say, 2,000 sightings, was that like 5 people or 2,000 people? Could it be it's just Gunnar and Björn and like Elspeth who were stood in the street and they're like, oh, yeah, I see them all the time, yeah. Like,
there might be more to it than just meteors. Maybe there is some other aerial phenomena in Sweden. Maybe it was Russian missile testing. Maybe it was Swedish military
and they were like,
it
must be the Russians, you guys. Oh, must be the Russians, so weird.
Yeah. It's annoying because there was a Greek weapons designer who had something to do with the fuse on the A bomb and things like that. So he was, he was a pretty eminent guy. And he said that the investigation got shut down because US officials were afraid to admit of superior technology against which we have no possibility of defense. So that was his reasoning that the US
But does that mean aliens?
But it's like... Wow, this is it. I mean, does it mean aliens? For me, that means no, that they are actually worried. If they are, it means the US are actually worried about what the Russians are
exactly.
up
That to me would be like the US officials are scared that the Russians are going to find out that they're investigating it, and then when they come up close, they're going to be like, yes, they don't know what it is.
And none of this rocket debris that was ever collected was metal or rocket casings.
That was going to be my next question. Was it like minerals and rocks and like porous materials?
It was normally things like it was normally things like meteorites.
The Russians are making meteorite rockets
and things like that.
The aliens
made of the same stuff of meteorites, so that if one goes off course, they can claim that it was a meteorite.
That would be clever. Or the aliens. You know, there's a lot of meteorites in space. How do you think the aliens are building their spaceships? Hello. Put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah. Now, the British had 2 pretty big investigations into the UFO phenomena. One was called the UK's Flying Saucer Working Party.
I love that. The Flying Saucers must be socialist, right? So.
Well, exactly. Flying Saucers Workers' Party.
They really believe in unions.
It does sound like one of those ridiculous parties that we have in this country where people are standing on a silly ticket, raving Lord Such type thing. The UK's Flying Saucer Working Party, and had a final report in June 1951, which was immediately declared top secret and kept secret for 50 years.
Oh my gosh.
So you can imagine the excitement when it was like opened up. It's like, here we go. We're going to find out about UFOs. And this is what it said. The Working Party concluded that all UFO sightings could be explained as misidentifications of ordinary objects or phenomena, optical illusions, psychological misperceptions, aberrations, or hoaxes.
Psych.
We accordingly recommend very strongly that no further investigation of reported mysterious aerial phenomena be undertaken unless and until some material evidence becomes available.
I love that. Sign me up to this party. I'm reinstating it just to tell people about this.
Well, it looks like it was reinstated.
Really?
Because there was, there was another UFO study by the Ministry of Defence in the UK called Project Codine, which is a very Condine. Condigan. Yeah, I think it's Condine.
Yeah. It's in alien speak.
Named after someone, sure. Yeah, it's alien speak. Between 1996 and 2000, they did another report, and guess what it said?
Go on.
It went, no artefacts of unknown or unexplained origin have been reported or handed to the UK authorities. Despite thousands of UAPs, there is no evidence that any UAPs seen in the UK air defence region are incursions by air objects of any intelligence, extraterrestrial or foreign, or that they represent any hostile intent. So the whole Ministry of Defence UFO department, including the website, everything, was shut down after that.
Wow.
Because it was like, there's just simply
Thousands
no point
of
doing
jobs
this.
lost.
And £50,000 a year apparently saved to the British taxpayer.
No way. I want to pay that. I want to pay that again.
That's barely a wage, isn't it? So
There must have been like two people.
Not like they could have been doing much work. Not even two people. I mean, it's like 2009, 50,000 quid. That's not even an office and a computer and an intern.
There was just this one guy who was getting really annoying during the other meetings. They were like, Ben, just go work somewhere else. Just do the UFO thing for a bit. I don't know. I love the idea that there could be anything in the UK, in the US, anywhere, that some kind of literally unidentified object could enter their airspace and not be immediately blown up by like whatever US Walmart machine gun horrible thing exists everywhere. Like, I don't think if something was flying over any kind of airspace that was even remotely monitored and we genuinely didn't know what it was, that we would just be like, let's just take some pictures and look into it later. Like, surely.
Oh, well, I mean, we've had some weird UK stuff happen. So
like
there's a US base. No.
That was pretty weird.
Well, yeah, that is pretty weird. Brexit. Well, I wonder if UFO sightings will go up as a result of Brexit.
Yeah. Unidentified EU airplane.
So there's the 1980 Rendlesham Forest incident. And in the light of what's just been said, you kind of can't help feeling that it must be a load of nonsense. But basically, the personnel involved in that actually said that they'd gone up to the spacecraft and touched it. And this unidentified object that had landed in the woods, and the US military people based in Suffolk in the UK actually went up and touched this UFO, which I believe would make it an encounter of the second kind.
Yes, I guess so. But wait, was it one person who went up to it?
Several base personnel.
That's weird.
Yeah, and gone up and touched the thing.
Was it all a big dare? How funny would it be, guys?
I think
if we all said it, they can't disbelieve all of us, right? And then they giggle.
Well, it's definitely easier to believe that than it is an alien spacecraft.
Yes.
I mean, we could start to come up with at least 1,000 different hypotheses that are more likely.
How many times in the history of mankind have groups of people collectively lied? Has that ever happened?
Well, I mean, it's worth talking about this whole idea of the null hypothesis. That's the jump from UFO to ETH.
Yeah.
That's the bit that's the most annoying, isn't it? Because, of course, there's unidentified objects. And actually, there's a little bit of me that sympathises with our boy from the original quote, Joseph Allen Hynek.
Yeah.
That there is a kind of there is this historical thing now that UFOs don't deserve scientific kind of consideration.
Kind of merit, right?
Yeah, but where do you sit on that? Do you think they should?
Well, first of all, there's a problem that there's unidentified everything in every field. If you go into medicine and you start talking about unidentified medical diseases, you would get a bunch. And if you go into every field has unidentified things. I think, like you pointed out, the problem is that people are so quick to jump from we don't know what this is to therefore it must be this very small subset of things that it could be that is really unlikely. I think everything deserves as much scientific investigation as we can afford. But from all the anecdotes that we're reading, it sounds like every time we've tried to, it's been pretty clear that there has been no sighting so far. And one of my favorite quotes, which I quote often in the context of, finding life on exoplanets and stuff, because that's what I study, is that extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidences. If there was something that was genuinely an unidentified flying object that entered our atmosphere and was seen, by governments, not like random people in the forest, and we all agree that there were several different hypotheses and none of them worked out, then of course that would deserve ongoing merit. But I feel like in its current state, there's not that many sightings. Nearly all of them do get an answer, which is weather balloon, usually. So it's not really like an ongoing field of research in that way. It's not something that we can go and be right, we're going to go look for some UFOs right now, because it's not something that you can go and study in the field like such. But
I liked your medical, in some ways, your medical thing about there being, things that we don't know, unidentified
There's
illnesses.
a bunch. We don't think that's alien diseases.
No, but exactly, yeah. We don't think, that he's obviously possessed by. But also, there's a really interesting element to that as well, where when people get ill, they might have a range of illnesses.
Precisely.
And it's the same. And it's the same with UFOs. There may be a complete range of explanations.
Exactly.
And you don't study human illness in general. You study cancer, or you study AIDS, or you study COVID-19, and you try and sort of go and therefore, it's a bit like when you get sick, putting it down to just this one simple explanation,
Precisely.
which of course actually is very similar to kind of other bits of woo, let's call it, which you see in medicine as well, where it's his chakras aren't aligned.
Right.
Well, actually, I guess it's the similar sort of people are going to believe in that are going to believe in, because the most frustrating thing about it is that ufologists sometimes bring up Occam's razor as their reason why UFOs are, that the extraterrestrial hypothesis is they've used Occam's razor to get there, because there's lots of phenomena, crop circles, abduction, cattle mutilation, all those sort of things, and they can all be explained by this one phenomena. So therefore, that's the simplest explanation, Occam's razor. And it's no, that's not how you use it.
It's funny you say that, because just the other day I read a funny quote, and I'm mad because I can't remember who the scientists in question were, but it was an example of these two scientists who are famous, and I don't remember who they are, but anyway, and they were looking at some kind of cyclotron result or something, and one of them was saying that, look at these 5 slides of results. This is showing that there's a new particle, And then the other guy was like, well, no, because in this one, you know, you can see that there's a distortion here, so that's probably an error. And in this one, you can see it's like slanted or whatever, so that's an error. And only in this one does it look like something. But you have an error of 1 in 5, so this is not significant. And the first guy was trying to claim the Occam's razor. He was saying, you have these 5 different explanations, whereas I have this one explanation that explains it all. But then the other person said something like, yeah, but the difference is that all 5 of mine make sense, and your one explanation does not. And this is the thing. It is Occam's razor. They're just 5 separate Occam razors going in different directions. It's not Occam's razor to just funnel everything into one answer and say, boom, there you go, that's the easiest one. They're all in their own right the easiest answer for that context.
Well, not only that, I think Occam's razor is more about what assumptions you have to make rather than it being a simple explanation. And so if you talk about UFOs and the extraterrestrial hypothesis, they think that their explanation is simple. Well, it's just visiting aliens. But the thing about that is, I've got an explanation that says, well, it could be an aerial phenomena that we don't know about. We know that we don't know every aerial phenomena there is, right? We also know, it's not an assumption, we know that there are psychological things going on in our brains that we don't fully understand, and we know about
Have you ever had floaters in your eyes?
We know about
Hello.
exact floaters in your eyes. We know about artifacts in cameras. So we know lots of things that aren't assumptions. However, to say that it's an extraterrestrial intelligence is assuming that aliens have built spacecraft that are capable of traveling the vast distances of space. And why would you assume that? In other words, the null hypothesis is all those other things. And I blame Sherlock Holmes a little bit. So Sherlock Holmes had this quote, and I think it's really, it's a good one because it's slightly wrong. The Sherlock Holmes, I like the quote, and in most cases it works, but for this, it's the once you eliminate the impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth, right? So you can understand the ufologist saying, well, I've eliminated the impossible. We know it's not a Russian aircraft. We know it's not an American weather balloon. So so I know it's improbable that aliens are visited, but that's got to be the truth because I've got rid of all the other possibilities. But of course, it doesn't take into account the things that we don't know.
We don't know what we don't know.
So there's things we know can be possibilities, but what about all the things that we don't know?
The quote should be...
You haven't ruled those out.
Exactly. The quote should be, when you eliminate the most statistically improbable, analyze the second least statistically improbable, and then keep going up the chain until you arrive at the answer.
So the Sherlock Holmes quote, unfortunately, has that little twist in it, doesn't it?
The premise, it's not factually incorrect, but it just needs to be interpreted with a big handful of salt.
In other words, once you eliminate the impossible, but eliminating the impossible is almost impossible to do. You just don't have the list of possible things, and therefore you can't have ruled out all the different possibilities because you don't have a complete list.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people also don't know how statistics work in the sense that, like we said with the medical analogy, the most extreme, rare, insanely unlikely scenarios that do happen to people, usually what's happening is a combination of more than one condition. It's like if someone happens to, be born with this particular condition and then they catch this rare disease or something, like some kind of interaction. And when you multiply statistically unlikely events, like you get a new kind of statistic for that thing. And I think there's all these hidden assumptions in, if you're saying aliens visited, you in the same way that if you wanted to multiply or combine the statistical likelihoods of like, your camera had a little fritz, and then also there was this weird weather pattern, and also a weather balloon happened to fly by. Maybe those three combine to give you a statistical likelihood of like this weird photo coming out, right? That's one likelihood. But then for the likelihood of intelligence life visiting, that's not just one probability event. That is, like we said, all of these other assumptions that, like, first of all, life exists. Second of all, they're able to travel. They're, able to enter our atmosphere fine. And, like, there's all of these other ones that are also being combined together to give a likelihood. And it's just, the maths don't check out.
No.
But unfortunately, and I mean, maybe I'm biased because if any of our listeners are bona fide, like, complete ufologist believers and you want to convince us, great, because I will confess that my kind of view of that kind of person comes more from, like, Louis Theroux Weird Weekends episodes. Like, that's the kind of mental image I have. But
oh no, absolutely. I mean, this is a bit of a taster. If there is someone listening who wants to, because we've had Marcus on before, and he talked about the moon landings being a hoax, and so it's always good to get that kind of person on, and I love the chats with the people on the other. We might be wrong.
Hey, what do we know? I've never seen it.
I think it's unlikely though.
Statistically unlikely.
But on this, it's statistically unlikely. I mean, but that's it, isn't it? I think if they are right, they've used Occam's razor, and therefore, if they are right that it's aliens, then they've just been incredibly lucky. As in, it's just a fluke because they hadn't eliminated all the other things. They hadn't considered competing hypotheses enough, and they've used really weak forms of evidence for it. But not only that, it's all circular reasoning, isn't it, as well? Because we said the reason why they used Occam's razor is because it was crop circles, alien abductions, and things like that. But all these things started when people started thinking about aliens.
Well, precisely.
And so obviously all these things are happening because we were thinking about aliens. So therefore, aliens are going to be a good explanation for them.
You're absolutely right.
But that's totally circular. But the other one that I think is big is this sort of God of the gaps. It's true because we don't know that it isn't true. So this is like a classic
Isn't that the
ufologist.
Russell teapot, like, with more steps?
Well, it is. It's good old Uncle Bertie's teapot. Yeah, absolutely. So you can't prove, you can't tell me that there's not a teapot.
That's a logical fallacy about
Jupiter.
the burden of proof. That's not something that you can...
Yeah.
Because therefore I could just say that I can fly and only I can prove you otherwise, but I don't feel like flying right now, so...
Yeah, well, UFO isn't a plane, therefore it's an alien spacecraft. Well, you don't know that it isn't.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the argument, essentially.
Anything. That's the thing.
That comes from a slight misunderstanding of that whole phrase. And it's another one where a phrase isn't quite complete. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
I love that quote.
Right?
Yes, that's a good quote.
And it is a great quote, but it's not quite right again. As in, it's useful. It actually should say absence of evidence is evidence for absence, but not proof of absence.
Thank you. Yes, that's a great way of putting it.
All that scientific work that did go into UFOs right at the beginning, it just kept coming up with nothing. And the more nothing that you come up with is evidence for absence.
You're absolutely right.
It's not proof of absence, but it's certainly evidence that that it's less likely. But you can never disprove it because proving a negative is impossible.
No, you're absolutely right. I don't know why I hadn't thought of that. That's true. I think, like, evidence does not mean proof in the sense that, if you were in court, there could be a bunch of evidence in either direction. And the proof, as in the ruling, would come from which stack of evidence combined with a supported argument gives a more probable interpretation of what is right.
Well, I'll give you a scenario of precisely that. Imagine I was having a really vicious argument with someone in the pub. Everyone could see it. And then I said, I'm going to kill you, and then dragged the guy down to the park. And I dragged him down to the park and said, I'm not really going to kill you. But at that moment, an alien came down and stabbed the guy to death in front of me. And I'm going, oh my God. And then he flies off. I go to court and I would definitely go down for that murder.
Right.
Even though it wasn't true. It was an alien that killed the guy. But the weight of evidence is just massively against me. So it's not saying that it's total proof.
And this is also...
But you can never have it.
And when you said earlier about where I stand on like the merit of investigating these things, that you've kind of summarized it. I am currently looking around at all the miscellaneous piles of evidence, some coming from ufologists, some coming from UFO apologists, if you will, and I'm gonna go with the stack of evidence that's more convincing to me, which is the one about the lack of evidence, and that also tells me that there's not a current urgent need to investigate this field. But if the ratio changes, then I'll change.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. These Nimitz videos are actually pretty interesting in the fact that they sum everything that you've just said up really neatly. Because it's like the moment you put any effort into looking at those videos, actually it doesn't take like an expert to break them down.
Do you want to say what they're about? Or what they show?
I'm going to do the Go Fast video, right? So there's a warship called the Nimitz, the USS Nimitz. And actually there's another one, the USS Theodore Roosevelt. And they have fighter jets that fly off them. They're aircraft carriers. And they have fighter jets that fly off them with unbelievable technology on board, right? So, these fighter jets have incredible technology that is normally infrared cameras that can gimbal and zoom in on things, not only zoom in on them, but lock on them as well. So this is high-end technology, which is one of the things why they didn't want to release the videos, because the videos themselves have quite a bit of technical information about what these jets are capable of. And the capacity and capability of these jets. So anyway, they get leaked because the pilots obviously think these
definitely
are
aliens.
Really interesting videos, right? Yeah, they're definitely aliens. Well, I mean, none of the pilots actually say that. Yeah. But this is another one that they go on the news and they're held as experts. But of course, the pilots themselves, they know how to fly a plane. They're probably expert at that. But I do doubt their expertise on, say, analysing infrared footage, right? So they may not be experts on that, but they're always held up as... So you've got these UFOs, and the Go Fast one is basically you see a little dot, and the video operator manages to get a lock on it, and which he gets very excited about, and it is really cool. Like in terms of his ability to operate the camera and gimbal it down and get a lock on this object is like pretty stunning. Yeah. Right. And bear in mind that the plane is flying at close to the speed of sound itself, probably wobbling around. And you've got this camera that's able to, gimbal and move around and pick out objects that are a long way away, not quite 100 miles away, but that sort of distance. Now, if you look at the footage, it looks like there's this little ball that's traveling very, very fast, right? But if you look at the numbers on the actual screen, you can tell roughly how far away it is. Mm-hmm. You can see the field of view of the camera, and you can work out that this object is about 1 meter long, right? Okay. You can just make out there's a kind of oscillation to it as well.
Interesting.
And it seems to be flying very fast. But if you have an object that's quite a long way away, and you're traveling very fast, then the background to that object looks like it's moving fast as well. So it makes the object look like it's moving fast, which is just a parallax.
Yeah. It's like when you're driving down the road and like you watch the trees go past you in the car compared to the mountains in the background.
Yeah, exactly. So the trees in the front, the trees by the side of the road are going much faster than the mountains in the background. Exactly the same thing. What is about 1 meter long, flies quite high above the sea, and oscillates. Can you think of anything?
Aliens.
Aliens, or could it be a goose or a duck or a seabird or something? A large seabird flapping its wings, and the parallax making it look as though it's going very, very fast. It even has a similar heat signature to a bird, i.e. the temperature that you see is that you would expect a bird that's flapping its wings. So I mean, it's literally, if you were to make a guess of what it was, it's still unidentified, by the way, because you can't prove
What's
it's a
his
bird.
name? Greg? Who knows? We don't know.
Exactly. But why you would jump to the fact that it's an alien spacecraft and the way that it's reported on the news is quite literally ludicrous.
I'm really
it's
cracking up at the idea of this like incredibly well-trained pilot who's like, I got him, boys, and it's a goose.
Well, the funny thing is that the video cuts off, right? So I reckon that the pilots know exactly what it is, and they say what it is. But of course, the person who's leaked the video thinks it's funnier to have this kind of, oh my God, what is it? What is it? And of course, the pilots may actually have worked out what it was, and the operator may have worked out what it was. But it's like, oh, come on, this is ridiculous. Yeah. And it's a similar sort of thing with the Tic Tac video as well. You can go and watch. I tell you, one of the best debunkers for this sort of stuff is a guy called Thunderfoot, and he does a really good one on the Tic Tac one, because he is an infrared camera specialist, and he says, you know, the thing that he noticed is the fact that metal objects reflect infrared light. Right, so what looks like an object disappearing might be an object no longer reflecting something like the sky back at the camera, right? And or its engines back at the camera. So it's like it hasn't disappeared.
And for listeners who don't know, I mean, infrared cameras, what they are really recording is heat, right? And they work very differently from the normal optical cameras that we use and take pictures with. What you're seeing is basically, it's kind of like, it's not colors, but it's intensities. So you're seeing light and dark. You're seeing high amounts and low amounts. So they work very differently, and you can't really compare it to if you look at an infrared photograph and you try to deduce things from it or interpret things, comparing it to your knowledge of how photographs work, then there's a lot of room for errors there.
Yeah, more than a lot of room.
There's basically only room for errors.
Yeah, and so I actually think all of those videos from the Nimitz and from Theodore Roosevelt, and there was another Russell, actually, another warship called the Russell. They all got videos, and I actually think they're pretty easy to sort of debunk and say
agree.
They're either other aircraft or they're birds. It's like,
there's a lot of birds.
Yeah, it's an easier explanation than saying it's alien technology, or even Russians or Chinese with ludicrous technology.
There's a lot of more birds than there are foreign. God, we're boring, aren't we? Where's our sense of whimsy? I hope people weren't pressing this, being like, "This is why there are UFOs in your house right now." Like, sorry guys, science only.
I saw a really, really funny Tim Peake interview. Oh, yeah? Tim Peake, obviously being the UK astronaut. And he was saying that when he was on the International Space Station, he was looking out, and he was used to, cargo vehicles like the Soyuz and possibly the Dragon as well, coming towards the ISS. And you would see the lights in the distance, and they would come towards you. And he was looking out the window one day in the
as
cupola,
you do,
and he was looking, as you do. He's looking out, and I can't remember what other astronaut he was with, and he's looking out. He goes, "That's funny. There's some lights coming towards us." He goes, "Are we expecting a vehicle today?" And the other one goes, "No, we're not expecting a vehicle." And he's like, "But can you see that?" And the other astronaut leans into the window and goes, "Yeah, I can see that." He goes, "What? Oh my God, what is it? There's something coming towards us with lights on, right?" And it's like, "Oh my God,
it's happening.
Is it a UFO?" And they're like, actually, like going, "What is it?" And they can't work out what it is. And then eventually, they work out. Tim Peake notices what it is, and do you know what it ends up being?
A goose.
No. A very high flying goose. No, it turns out that it was the Russian Wii. coming out of the Russian end of the space station. It was leaking out into space, becoming crystallized and reflecting the lights. And that's what they could see.
Hilarious.
Was basically frozen Russian
frozen
wheat.
urine.
So it just goes to show that even a trained pilot, and Tim Peake is a test pilot,
of course.
and like a super high-end test pilot,
and then the other one who
astronaut,
came in.
And the other one is also a test pilot and an astronaut. Yet they were both fooled into by an optical illusion into thinking that it was something with lights coming towards the ISS.
I don't know if book report or book recommendations are allowed on here, but there's a fantastic book. I'm biased because he's Swedish, Hans Rosling. You maybe know him. He's very famous. He's done a lot of TED Talks. And he has a book called Factfulness. And the idea is very much like to play on the word mindfulness, that, you know, you should be mindful of things and like try to be zen and in the moment. And his point is that you should be the same when you try to interpret the world around you. Whenever you read a number, a statistic, a report on, you know, like X hundred people died in this earthquake or things like this, there should be some kind of factfulness practice where you think, right, what does this number mean? What does it mean in context?
I love this.
I think both Obama and Bill Gates or something like that both recommended it as like, this is the book every human ever should read. And I completely stand by that as well, being in the same level as those two. And it's a really fantastic book. And it goes through like a couple of different ways in which we tend to overreact or misunderstand things when they are happening to us. And one of the points that he raises, there's like one chapter per thing, and he does talk about like this adrenaline decision-making that we have as humans. We always just assume like if there's a fear in the back of our mind that something could happen, if there's even a tiny sign of it, we're like, that's it, it's happening. The ghost is coming out of my wardrobe. Like my do you know what I mean? Like any kind of fear that you have.
Yeah.
If you are looking for aliens, you're gonna find evidence for aliens.
I love the explanation that is caused by our evolution. As in, if you're walking if you're walking in the savannah and there's rustling in the grass, you can say it may not be a lion, or you can say it's a lion. Right? You can just assume that it's going to be a lion. Now, who's the more likely to survive? The one that says it might not be a lion. I'll go and investigate. Yeah, it's a snail. If it is a lion, they're going to die and not have any children. Whereas the one that jumps to the conclusion, it's a lion, I'm just going to, here's my heuristic, here's my rule of thumb. If I see the grass moving, it's a lion. And we're stuck with that mode of thinking. That's exactly
tens
what
of thousands of years later, here we are, a bunch of monkeys with anxiety. And the world has come.
Monkeys thinking we see UFOs.
And then they're scared to go to work. No, but it's absolutely. I mean, there's so much human psychology at work at all times, and like we touched upon, we've come full circle now. Like we said, everyone's got a freaking phone in their pocket at all times, and the fact that now that people are, I don't know, maybe more aware of and aliens have also become less of like a flying saucer type of thing in the media. You're probably more or less likely to be interpreting things that you see as such, depending on how much media you've consumed recently about that thing.
I must admit, I must get that factfulness
incredible
book. That sounds absolutely up my street, and I should definitely be giving it to the students. The one that I've been talking to my students about a lot is the Carl Sagan's baloney detection kit. Oh
yes,
that's really good. It's another one where you can apply to UFOs. Really, it's the moment you apply it to that, it's fairly obvious that you end up with the right answer, which is there's unidentified flying objects, but that does not make them extraterrestrial in origin, because the amount of assumptions that you have to make. And I like to, in my mind, I think of things like everyone having a camera phone now, everyone having the internet, everyone having access to loading up their things on YouTube and Instagram videos and stuff like that. Yet there is still no convincing evidence
Yeah.
for UFOs. It feels like the foil hat
Yeah.
brigade are being painted into a corner, and when that happens, there's all the special pleading comes out and all that. But the tech on these spacecrafts, they can't be picked up on cameras.
Right,
And
it's
like,
beyond the.
But don't you understand? This is just now. You now have to get into that special pleading all the way down to the corner of the room where you've painted yourself.
We're naming all the
it.
logical fallacies today. We got special pleading, moving the goalposts as well. Here.
Well, they definitely move the goalposts. But so how are we going to conclude this? What's your conclusion about UFOs?
Actually, my final conclusion is maybe one that comes from a place of sympathy, because I also realized that when you have gone down the rabbit hole of, the government is covering this up and they're all, having to hide it because they made an agreement with the aliens that they'll blow us up if we talk about it, whatever. And if you are already of that belief, then any further evidence is just going to be, in their eyes, biased from the enemy. So if they're saying the government's covering it up, and then we say, well, actually, the government did a bunch of reports and say that they haven't covered it up, then they're going to be like, well, yeah, obviously. Like, it's really hard to convince someone who is distrusting experts and research to try to convince them otherwise with experts and research.
That goes back to flat earthers, isn't it? I do sympathise with that position, because in some ways they are the true skeptics that don't believe anything that they haven't seen with their own eyes, and therefore any knowledge that's been built hard-earned by science over the last 2,000 years, they can't fully accept it. Yeah. It's kind of not how life works. When you go to the shops, if you see a can of baked beans, you trust. There is an element of trust that Heinz have actually put baked beans in that can, right? And I think we have to build that same element of trust with science. And of course, if you don't trust, if I don't trust Heinz,
then you can't buy anything.
Buy Heinz baked beans from the shop. You can't buy anything. Yes, you can't
be like
buy anything.
ripping things up in Tesco like a lunatic.
Yeah. Like a lunatic, yeah. I mean, it's really hard, isn't it? I also do sympathise a little bit with the fact that maybe some UFO sightings maybe should have scientific research done into them, but I think, what's the point of having this big umbrella term of UFOs? Why not research just the individual things on a case by case basis?
Fully agree.
So it's like, you're not just because you investigated that particular phenomena, what makes you want to investigate this particular phenomena? And if you keep interested in all these different phenomena, is it because you're trying to cherry pick the evidence to make it look as though it's extraterrestrials? And it's just like, probably yes. It's weird, isn't it? I think
there's a cute sense of irony that the classic like UFO believer sticker is "I want to believe." I think that's weirdly telling. I want to believe, not I have reason to believe. I want to believe.
Yeah, well, wanting to believe is normally my heuristic for there is danger here. Wanting to believe is precisely why you should be extra suspicious of that particular belief, because I want to believe in an afterlife.
I want to believe that I
kind of. But that makes me extra suspicious that there probably isn't one.
I want to believe that I can eat an entire birthday cake at 0 calories, but that's because I can't believe, because that's simply not true.
Sometimes I can't believe it's not butter.
Only sometimes. It's there's a varying degree of butter believability.
Other times I can believe that I can't believe is not butter.
I'm suspicious that this is butter. I say, opening the Heinz can of beans in Tesco.
Right, well, I've got a competition. I want a Spodcat to send in their very best UFO sighting.
I thought you were going to...
And I'm going to read it out and put the picture, if they have one, on the website.
I thought you were going to say send in your best alien impersonation.
Or you could say, well, you could do that.
Bonus assignment.
Or your best hoax.
Yeah.
You know, if you're really good at hoaxing these things. I mean, because that's the other thing that's proliferated on YouTube, I've noticed, is people doing very convincing home video footage using sophisticated CGI of. So it's in the world of deep fake, it's going to be impossible, isn't it, to kind of have evidence anymore, which is going to muddy the water unbelievably.
I hate the future. Get me out of here.
I hate the future. Well, on that note, we better end it. Oh, well, thanks very much, Lynn, for coming
pleasure,
on and chatting.
as always.
UFOs. It was for Jelly. Thanks
Jelly,
for the suggestion. It's definitely one that we should have done a long time ago. And and the offer is definitely open to anyone who wants to come on and chat about UFOs
and why me and Matt are wrong.
And why we are wrong. Then we're more than happy to talk about it. But unfortunately, I just don't get the connection between UFOs and extraterrestrial hypothesis, the ETH. There doesn't seem to be. There's a massive.
It's a
disconnect
bit like saying every unnamed baby is called Bob. Just because it's unidentified doesn't mean that it's this one thing.
Yeah, well, it's a bit like if someone mysteriously dies. It's like you said, if someone mysteriously dies, it wasn't an unknown illness. It was an alien. It must have been an alien. Yeah. It's so it's obviously something bad's happened. Well,
takeaway message and something, again, Factfulness, great book. Something it covers is that we tend to jump to conclusions without combining reasons. And nearly nothing in this life is black and white. There's nearly always multiple causes or catalysts or whatever. And I think 99.9% of things that aren't easily explained, there is a simple explanation in the sense, not simple as in not complex, but simple as in only, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I know exactly what I mean. Really, we're always looking for a simple narrative, aren't we? And a simple narrative to a whole collection of unidentified aerial objects. It is extraterrestrial. But just because it's a simple explanation, that isn't Occam's razor, because it requires far too many assumptions
across a huge river of statistics.
A little fact for you. I used to live next to Occam, the place.
Oh, really?
Occam. I used to take the kids paintballing in Occam, which is where Occam's razor is from.
I didn't know that. I didn't know it was a place. Is it not a person?
Yeah, it's a little. Yeah, it was a. I think he was a vicar or something like that in the town.
Did he name the town, or did the town name him?
No, he was something like something of Occam.
Occam's bishop's razors or something.
now it's become Occam's razor. But yeah, it's named after the little Surrey village that's at the M25. Yeah, if you're on the A3, you get to the M25. That is Occam, the junction of the A3 and the M25.
I've never heard of it, because I hate the M25. So avoid it at all costs.
Avoid at all
but
costs.
Occam's nice,
yeah,
I'm sure.
Absolutely. It is actually. It's quite a nice little place. There's a nice.
Do they sell souvenir razors?
Do you know what they really should do? But I honestly think the people of Occam are blissfully unaware of Occam's razor and their place in history. Is that some kind of irony there? They've assumed that it's someone's name.
Like I did, yeah.
Yeah. Right, that's it.
Bye.
Bye, Podcast.